Hi guys, and welcome to this video. This is Rianne, and today I'm going to be making a skirt and a top that match and go together. So the first thing I started with was this, I think it was 5 yards of fabric, kind of this satin fabric, kind of thin, and I folded it over and then cut it to length so that it would be the right length for the skirt. And then set aside the chunk that I cut off to use to make the top later. And then once I had it cut, I had about 8 layers. So I needed to divide my waist measurement by 16 because I was going to have, 8 layers times 2 because a little bit from the top and a little bit from the bottom. I ended up with about 2 inches for the final product. And then I used the measuring tape to put a line of pins from one 2-inch section to the other, and then cut between the two. Once I had that, I went to my sewing machine and I stitched all of the skirt pieces together. And then once I had a panel stitched together, or 2 panels stitched together, I also went over that seam right along the edge with a zigzag stitch to prevent it from fraying and to make sure that the raw edges didn't come apart or anything like that. And I also trimmed them with the scissors so that it would all be around the same length instead of having random longer sections that would be easy to trip over. And I did that with all 9 panels, 7 full panels and 2 half panels. And don't forget to leave a section open or kind of a little bit at the top so that you can put the skirt on. This time I did actually put in a zipper, and that's what you can see that I'm doing right now. I put in a zipper, and then I also put a hook and eye clasp at the top of that to make sure that it would stay correctly. Once I had the zipper in and enough of it that I would be able to put the skirt on, I cut off the excess because the zipper was much longer than I needed, and then finished stitching down the side of that seam, and then went over it with a zigzag stitch to lock it down. The next thing I did was I took this binding, it's in a sort of a shade of green that's a little darker than this teal blue, and I put the binding around the, kind of as a waistband, around that edge of the waist. That way I wouldn't have to try and lock down the edge with a zigzag stitch or something. It just kind of makes it a little bit more clean. And then that all the way around to the edge and then cut off the excess. Make sure to tuck the edges so that none of the raw edges on the binding showed. And then after that, I think I put the hook and eye clasp on after I had the binding on. Once I had the binding on, I used a tea light candle to melt the edges of the bottom hem, so that I wouldn't have to do a rolled hem or something like that. This is just a really quick way to make sure that it's not going to come apart or fray, but it also still looks really clean. But you also have to go pretty quick with it so that you don't melt funky holes and odd placement into the bottom edge. Once I had the skirt finished, or at least mostly finished, I went ahead and started on the top with some help from Jordan. I put on a shirt that I did not want or necessarily like anymore and used duct tape to kind of make the pattern. I started by putting a line under my bust to kind of start as a starting point, and then had Jordan wrap around the back. And the important thing with that is to make sure that you are communicating with each other and also to just have fun with it. Um, the other thing to keep in mind when making a pattern like this is if your pattern is symmetrical, you only have to make half of the pattern. Um, Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting duct tape for the other half because you're basically going to make half of the pattern and then use it correct ways with like right side up, and then flip it over and use it upside down or backwards to make the other half. But I did wrap all the way around on the bottom edge and around my middle to make sure that it was sitting correctly and that it would fit correctly once everything was said and done. I was able to do a lot of it kind of myself, but anything on my back I couldn't quite reach correctly. And so Jordan was able to do that, and you can tell that we get confused and have to kind of re explain things lots of different ways to be able to put it correctly. And then I was able to do the front and kind of just adjust things, and if I needed help with something I couldn't quite see, Jordan would help with that. And overall, this pattern came out quite nice. Once I was pretty sure I had the shape I wanted, or like the overall general shape, um, I went ahead and started drawing the lines of where to cut with a Sharpie. Jordan drew a line straight down my spine. Um, like I said, you're only going to need to make half a pattern. And then the other thing is that I should have pointed out earlier, when you're making these patterns, it is good to put more tape around than you need or that you think you'll need, because it's better to cut off excess than to try and add more once you take it off. And then partway through drawing the lines, we realized that I needed shoulder straps, sleeves, something to connect to. and so we had to kind of pause and add more duct tape over my shoulder. Once again, once the duct tape was in the overall shape that I wanted and a little bit wider than we needed, we went ahead and Jordan helped me draw the lines and all of that, and then she cut me out. When it's this tight, it's not going to pull over your head, so you kind of have to cut it off with scissors. And then you'll see that she did not cut on the line, she cut a little to the side of the line, to leave excess room so that I could trim it off while I was cutting it. Once I had the pattern off of my body, I could cut out the overall what I needed. So I cut down the line that was down the straight of my middle in the front, and then I also reinforced all the lines that I wasn't able to draw properly while it was on my body using different marks that Jordan helped me put in place, and cut down the line that was down my spine around all the edges. I should point out that when you're making an armhole, always make it a little bigger than you think, otherwise you're going to struggle to move. And then when I was labeling things, I thought I was going to cut the straps off entirely. I ended up not doing that, but I labeled the straps separately, and that ended up being unnecessary, and I ended up taping the back strap back in place. And then I did end up cutting the front strap off, and then attaching it to the top part of the back strap later on. And then I was trying to get the pattern to lay flat, because that's kind of the whole goal with the pattern, is you want it to lay flat so that it can sit on the flat fabric, and then you can cut out the pieces and put it together like a puzzle, and then it becomes more of a 3D model. And so I cut this piece here, and then decided I didn't need that cut, and so I taped it back together. Trial and error, trial and error. And of course, Velvet had to make sure that we were all doing everything correctly and inspect that the fabric was of good quality. Once I had the pattern all cut out, I was able to trace it along the fabric. You'll notice that I'm not tracing right up against the pattern. I am adding seam allowance, which is important if you want it to fit. And then this is a little piece of fabric. I had like 3 of them. So this piece of fabric did not fit the entire pattern at once, but the thing is, when you're tracing a pattern onto fabric, you want to try and use up as little space as possible so that you can make sure to have enough fabric for all of what you want to do. And of course, once I had all of the pattern traced down for one side, I flipped it over upside down and traced all of the pieces for the other side. So half a pattern, whole top, whole corset. Once I had it all traced out, I cut it out and then rearranged it into the right spacing, stitched them together piece by piece. Like I said, it's very much like a puzzle, and then I also traced the pieces onto the fabric that you'll see on the outside and not just the lining, and cutting out all the pieces and stitching them together. And then the sleeves are definitely an odd shape to play with. I ended up not doing so well on the sleeves, but that's all right. Once I had the main part of the top, I actually did not cut out the bust using the pattern. I actually stitched it down just like a long strip, pleated repeatedly, and then I put it on the mannequin and pinned it in place and pinned all of the pleats until it looked the way I wanted it to, and then I would carefully take it off of the mannequin and stitch it down. Once I had the main amount of the top, I could add the sleeves, and the sleeves were kind of problematic because I found that it did not fit correctly. But of course, we'll get to that later. I added a channel for boning, put the boning in, and then added grommets and lacing in the back. So overall, it came out quite cute. It looked really pretty, and honestly, it was a good pattern, a good design. Definitely cute, but I couldn't move my arms. I am definitely still learning when it comes to sleeves, and couldn't move my arms, so I ended up cutting them off. So I carefully cut right along the seam, and then any raw edges or funny fluffy stuff that happened to show up, I kind of melted using a lighter, and then also just trimmed off any of the fluff. And so it left me with kind of a tank top. And then these sleeves, which I cut and then melted the edges and then used an elastic thread in a bobbin to cinch in so that it would be these kind of short pleated floating sleeves. And like I said, stretchy, and then I was able to put them on. And even though it came out as 3 separate pieces, or rather 4 with the 2 sleeves, I could actually move, and it honestly was quite cute. Having so many different separate pieces that can go together or were designed to go together but aren't attached to each other allows for a lot more styling choices. Of course, the sleeves can come off and be used completely separate, or the skirt or the top can be used without it. All in all, it came out great. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to leave any suggestions or comments you may have, and we'll see you next time.